Hello there, John Cuturillo here, the counsellor of your listener. Thank you for joining me for this episode. As usual, thank you to everybody who makes this work possible. Also, as usual, if you have concerns about yourself or somebody else, please never take what you find on the internet or in the media as advice. Seek advice from a professional. In today's episode, I'm going to be making a philosophical reflection on people who have complex personalities or with whom we have complex relationships. Now, I must emphasize that this is a highly complex subject, a highly nuanced subject that, to be honest, I haven't completely defined the parameters of yet, because complex has so many different meanings as a concept, as a word. There are so many people whom we could describe as complex, but not all of them are the type of person on whom I'm about to reflect in this discussion. So this is very much a reflection of sorts to prompt further thought and further discussion. And this subject arose to me recently after a discussion with someone who was reflecting on having a complex relationship with somebody else of the description that I'm about to give. When I refer to people with whom we have complex relations, I'm talking about relationships that cause us ambivalence, and people of whom we have an ambivalent understanding or who cause us to have ambivalent feelings. And by that I mean the type of person who can be incredibly hurtful to us in some respects or at some times, but with whom we still desire to have some type of relationship, and at other times can be virtuous in our life. I have to emphasize here the complexity in this subject because, again, just because you cannot understand someone, it doesn't mean that they are at fault. Just because somebody has characteristics that are unorthodox to us or even to society at large, it does not mean they're at fault or that it's necessarily bad. It doesn't mean that even if a person causes us to have ambivalent feelings and that we feel differently about them at different times, it's not even necessarily them. It could be the way that we're interpreting them or perceiving them. But a larger number of us will have had at least one relationship in the past of any description with somebody who causes these types of experiences for us. To give some examples, think about people who at times are incredibly judgmental of us, but we still desire their friendship, and maybe we make justifications for why we want to be their friends. Maybe we value what they do bring to us during the good times, and maybe we believe that their judgmental nature or the part of them that hurts us is actually born of their own hurt, and we want to help them in some way. Think about people who perhaps might create a difficult relational situation for us because we find it difficult to tolerate their characteristics. Perhaps they could be good or bad characteristics. Perhaps they're quite controlling. Perhaps they're so fastidious that it is tedious for us. Perhaps they're an attention seeker. Perhaps they expect of us what we can't give or can't be expected to give. Perhaps they talk to us in ways that don't meet our emotional needs or that can feel invalidating. But at the same time, we perceive a lot of virtue in them. Perhaps we find them to be highly intelligent, highly supportive. Perhaps they do a lot for us financially. And we perceive this as a complex situation because at some times that person is a virtue in our life, at other times they cause us much pain. And it's hard for us to identify whether we genuinely feel that relationship is good or bad because the magnitude of the good and the bad seems to be, at least on face value, approximately equal. Now, this doesn't include the normal range of criticisms that we might direct at another person, because none of us is perfect. And if you ask somebody honestly to evaluate even the people they value most and admire most and respect most and like most in their lives, they will be able to name some factors which could improve in some way. But we don't have complex relationships with these people just because we can name weaknesses or aspects of themselves which could improve, because we can all improve in some way. As a counsellor, I receive referrals from others, and I also like to help my audience become aware of resources and other providers which may be beneficial, as well as help other individuals and organisations gain exposure. That's why I host the Your Listener Partner Network, and I'd like to thank my partners for their support. I'd like to introduce Jibeli Positive Pathways. Jibeli Positive Pathways is an NDIS registered provider specialising exclusively in positive behaviour support. They support children, young people and adults with disability who experience behaviours of concern, using evidence-based, person-centered and trauma-informed approaches. Their work focuses on understanding the functions of behaviour, reducing restrictive practices, and building meaningful skills and improving quality of life. They collaborate closely with families, support workers, schools, and services to ensure strategies are practical, consistent, and sustainable across everyday settings. Find them at www.jabellipositivepathways.com.au. But I'm referring to the people whereby the parts that cause trouble for us, turmoil or hurt, are so strong that it is impossible for us to actually evaluate the relationship as bad or good overall. It also doesn't refer to people whom we simply can't understand, because not being able to understand someone doesn't mean that they're bad. A good example of this is the person that we find hard to pin down because their opinions or the way that they live their life doesn't fit into any one philosophy or any one characterization. I'm not labeling myself favorably or unfavorably in this light, but I can be an example in the sense that when I might discuss specific issues, I might present suppositions that are characteristic of different social philosophies or different religions or different political views. And people might say, well, John's hard to pin down, so to speak. But just because somebody is like that, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're complex or that they're being intellectually dishonest. I've said this before, and I will say it again and encourage other people to consider this, that I don't base what I think or how I evaluate ideas on the philosophy from which they derive. Remember that all the boxes into which we fit people are creations of our own minds. All political philosophies, all religions, all social philosophies, all cultures are creations of our own minds. And it doesn't mean that they're bad or that we should eliminate them, but rather that if somebody's characteristics do not fall within the range of one particular framework that we have created, that is not to say that there is something wrong with them, or that they necessarily have a responsibility always to adjust themselves into line with that framework so that we can understand them. What we have to accept is that frameworks are invented to understand the world, and that if we fear people because they do not fit into those frameworks, it is not necessarily because they are bad people or that they should change, but rather that our minds are predisposed to seek comfort in certainty and familiarity. And so if somebody falls outside of the range of familiarity for us, it is our mind's evolutionary tendency to judge them in order to protect us from what we don't understand. But often that leads us into unnecessary division and conflict in society. So not fitting into boxes or being hard to pin down is not the type of person who has a complex personality or with whom we have a complex relationship. Simultaneously, if a person is logically inconsistent on purpose or intellectually dishonest in that they apply logic differently or adopt different perspectives or opinions based on the situation and what brings them the most favour, then yes, that is absolutely something that is not good, because it is an attempt to manipulate people's perception of you by misleading them. But a complex person causes us much conflict when we relate to them personally. We may feel a strong desire to be in a relationship with them of some description. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but simultaneously there is much about them that hurts us. For some people this may be abuse, and some people may try to rationalise that what their partner, for example, is doing is not abusing them, even though it is actually abuse. And they may simply say, well, I have a complex relationship with them. At other times it may not be abuse. I have seen this also in, for example, people's relationships with their health professionals, like their doctors or psychotherapists, in which a person may feel quite safe in the presence of their professional sometimes, or may feel like they don't trust anyone else, but at the same time that professional does not treat them with the respect that a professional ought to treat someone. There is a very fine balance to be struck in considering how you relate to people and how people perceive you. On one side of this balance, one wants to avoid becoming a people pleaser. They don't want to simply change themselves to make sense to other people just because other people feel uncomfortable with them. Again, being somebody who is unorthodox or against the status quo and having people uncomfortable with that doesn't mean that you're in the wrong. It means that we are predisposed to favour that which is familiar or comfortable or certain and criticise that which is uncertain or unfamiliar. And to simply change oneself in relation to how comfortable people feel with you or how well people understand you in every conceivable case, sooner or later will will manifest as you eliminating from yourself the virtues that make you special as an individual. At the same time, I argue that we have a certain duty to obey certain social norms because certain social norms are in place for a reason, to facilitate cohesive and friendly relations between people. And if you are someone who is constantly criticizing people unnecessarily or being judgmental or being overly controlling, there's a reason why people react badly to that. It's a threat to them psychologically. And even if in your own mind you may have a justified reason to do what you do, one must think quite carefully in deciding to be that person. Because you can change, you can choose to be a different person, and part of the journey of life is constantly evaluating who you want to be and asking, am I comfortable being this person, but for other people's criticism of me? Is it justifiable that I continue to be this way? Or is it more justifiable that I bring myself into line with other people's expectations because they have a genuine reason to have those expectations, and at the same time, that it would actually make my relationships with them better and would actually be fairer to them and kinder to them psychologically? There are no big answers here. It entirely depends on the specified issue at hand. So there are no final solutions about how we can stop being complex or what constitutes a complex personality or having a complex relationship with someone. But it's something about which we should think often. I think one of our greatest concerns as individuals should be, can people have reasonably comfortable relations with us? Doesn't mean they have to agree with us. It doesn't mean that we have to fit into every expectation that they have, but it means that are we doing everything we can not to make our relations with that person unreasonably strenuous for them? And within bounds, that's certainly a fair responsibility to take for us. So thank you for joining me for this episode. As usual, if you have concerns about yourself or somebody else, please seek support from a professional or somebody else that you trust. Don't take what you find on the internet or in the media as advice. If you are seeking counselling in Australia, you can find my contact details in the description of this episode. And if you have feedback on the program or would like to be a guest, please contact me. I love to hear from my audience. And until next time, take care.